This happened last winter when I was driving home from visiting my parents. It was late, close to midnight, and I was on a quiet rural highway with barely any cars around. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and the road was surrounded by dense forest on both sides. No streetlights, just the occasional reflective road sign glowing in my headlights. I had about an hour left before I got home when my check engine light came on. A second later, the car started sputtering, losing power. I swore under my breath and pulled over to the shoulder. The engine died completely. I tried turning the key again, but all I got was a weak click. No crank, nothing. I checked my phone, no signal. Typical. I was in the middle of nowhere. For a few minutes, I just sat there, hoping another car would pass by. Nothing. I weighed my options. Either wait and hope for help or start walking. I knew there was a gas station about 5 kilometers back, so I grabbed my coat and flashlight and stepped out. The cold hit me instantly. The air was still too quiet. My breath came out in clouds as I started walking along the shoulder. The only sounds were my boots crunching the frost-covered gravel and the occasional rustling of trees in the wind. After about 10 minutes, I saw something ahead, just off the road in the ditch. At first, I thought it was an animal, but as I got closer, I realized it was a man. He was crouched near the tree line, facing away from me. I hesitated. Something about the way he was positioned felt wrong, like he had been dropped there. He wasn't moving. I cleared my throat. "Hey man, you okay?" Slowly, he turned his head. The moment our eyes met, I knew something was off. His face was pale, gaunt. His eyes were too wide. And he smiled, this slow, stretched grin that didn't match the situation. Then he stood up, far too quickly. I took a step back. "You need help?" He didn't answer. He just started walking toward me. Not running, just a steady, deliberate pace. A deep instinct told me to move. I turned and walked faster. Then I heard it, his footsteps picking up behind me. I didn't look back. I broke into a sprint. My boots slipped slightly on the cold pavement, but I didn't stop. The gas station was still far, but I had no choice but to keep going. Then I heard laughing. It was low at first, almost like a chuckle, but it grew louder, more unnatural. I risked a glance over my shoulder. He wasn't running anymore. He was standing in the middle of the road, just watching me, shoulders twitching as he laughed. But the sound, it was distorted, like multiple voices layered on top of each other. I ran harder. After what felt like forever, I saw headlights up ahead, an old pickup truck coming toward me. I ran straight into the road, waving both arms. The driver, an older man, slammed on the brakes. I ran to his window, breathless. "Please, I need help. My car broke down." The man looked me over, then glanced behind me. "You okay, son?" I turned. The road was empty. No sign of the man. My chest was heaving, and my breath turned to fog in the cold air. I didn't know what to say. I just nodded and told him I needed a ride. The old man drove me back to my car. When we got there, the hood was open, but I hadn't touched it. There were long, wet handprints smeared across the windshield. I didn't bother trying to fix the car. The old man drove me all the way home. The next morning, when I went back with the tow truck, my car was still there, but the handprints were gone, and my engine started on the first try. Even now, I don't know what I saw that night. I just know one thing. As I was getting into the old man's truck, I glanced at the tree line one last time. I swear I saw something standing there, watching, smiling. This happened a couple of years ago, and to this day, I still don't have an explanation for what I saw that night. I was driving home from a weekend camping trip in the Flinders Ranges. It was late, maybe around 11 p.m., and I was taking a back road shortcut that shaved about 40 minutes off my drive. It was one of those long, empty highways with nothing but bushland on either side. No houses, no streetlights, just darkness stretching forever. I was maybe an hour from home when my car, a 2002 Nissan Patrol, suddenly lost power. No warning, no sputtering, just dead. The engine cut out, my lights went off, and I had to wrestle the wheel to pull over onto the shoulder. My battery seemed fine, but when I turned the key, the engine wouldn't even crank. It was eerily silent outside. No wind, no crickets, just dead, suffocating quiet. I had no cell signal, and after about 10 minutes of fiddling with the battery and checking fuses, I accepted that I was stuck. My only real option was to wait until morning or hope another car passed through. I locked my doors, leaned my seat back, and tried to rest. But then, about 20 minutes later, I started hearing something, a faint shuffling sound. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me, but then I heard it again. Slow, deliberate footsteps on the gravel behind my car. I sat up fast, my heart pounding. I couldn't see anything in my mirrors, but the sound kept getting closer. I reached for my flashlight and hesitated before flicking it on. The beam cut through the darkness, sweeping over the road and the bushes, but there was nothing there. Then, just as I was about to turn it off, my light caught something in the distance, a figure standing by the tree line. It was just barely visible, but I could make out the shape of a person. They weren't moving, just standing there, facing me. I called out, "Hey, you all right?" No response. Something about the way they stood, completely still, set off every alarm in my brain. My gut told me not to get out of the car. I slowly reached for my keys, even though I knew my engine wouldn't start, and tried again. Nothing. When I looked back up, the figure was gone. I was scanning the area with my flashlight when I heard a sound, this time much closer. A soft scraping noise, like something dragging against the road. My stomach dropped as I realized it was coming from the driver's side. I turned my flashlight towards the window, and that's when I saw it. Face. It was inches from the glass, just barely illuminated by my light. But it wasn't normal. The features were wrong. Too long, too pale, with wide, glassy eyes that didn't blink. The mouth was slightly open, revealing teeth that looked almost too sharp. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. I wanted to scream, to move, but I couldn't. Then, without warning, the thing grinned. Not a normal grin. It stretched too wide, too unnatural, like its skin was barely holding together. And then it whispered something. I didn't hear it through the glass, but I felt it, like the words were being pushed directly into my head. I panicked. My fingers fumbled for the ignition again, twisting the key over and over, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The thing outside didn't move, it just watched. And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. I didn't see it leave. 1 second it was there, and the next, I was alone. My engine roared to life. I slammed it into gear and took off, my hands shaking as I floored it down the empty road. I didn't look in my mirrors. I didn't stop until I reached the nearest town, where I pulled into a service station, locked my doors, and tried to breathe. The next morning, I had my car towed to a mechanic. They couldn't find anything wrong with it. No electrical issues, no fuel problems, nothing. It started up perfectly fine when they tested it. I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And I know, deep down, that whatever was out there in the dark that night, it wasn't human. I never took that shortcut again. I don't tell this story often because, honestly, I still don't know how to explain what happened. This was about 4 years ago, during the winter. I was driving home from visiting my parents, which is about a 5-hour trip through some pretty rural areas. My car wasn't anything special, a 2004 Honda Accord, but it had never given me any real problems before. That night, though, I learned that even the most reliable things can fail you when you need them most. It was already late, maybe around 11 p.m., and I was on a stretch of road that ran through thick forest. No streetlights, no houses, just trees and darkness on either side. My gas tank was half full, and I had about 2 hours left to go. I wasn't too worried until my headlights flickered. At first, I thought it was just a bump in the road messing with the electricals. But then my dashboard lights dimmed and my engine stuttered. A few seconds later, my headlights cut out completely. The car coasted to a stop on the side of the road, and when I turned the key, nothing happened. I sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel, listening to the eerie silence. No cars had passed me for at least 20 minutes, and my phone had barely any signal. I tried calling for roadside assistance, but the call wouldn't go through. Text messages weren't sending either. The only light came from the weak glow of my phone screen. I turned on my flashlight and shined it around, hoping to spot a driveway, a house, something. But there was nothing, except trees and the cracked pavement stretching into the darkness. Then, I heard it. A crunching sound. Footsteps on gravel. I froze. The noise wasn't coming from the road. It was coming from the woods. Someone or something was moving just beyond the tree line. My flashlight wasn't strong enough to see past the first few trees, but I swear I could make out the shape of someone standing there. I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination. Maybe it was an animal. But then the footsteps came closer. I locked my doors and kept my eyes on the trees, trying not to blink. The footsteps stopped right at the edge of the woods, maybe 10 feet away. I could barely make out a tall figure standing just out of reach of my flashlight's beam. Then, in the dead silence, I heard a voice. Need help? It wasn't a normal voice. It was slow, too measured, like whoever it belonged to was deliberately imitating human speech, but not quite getting it right. I didn't answer. The figure shifted, stepping forward just enough that I could see the outline of its face. But something was wrong. The features didn't look natural. The eyes were too wide, the mouth slightly open, as if it was frozen mid-word. I fumbled for my phone and tried dialing 911, but there was still no signal. When I looked back up, the figure was closer. I don't remember making the decision to move. I just did. I turned the key in the ignition again and again, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then, without warning, the headlights flashed back on, and the thing was gone. Not like it ran away, it was just gone. I didn't stick around to figure it out. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of there, speeding down that empty road, glancing in my rearview mirror every few seconds. I didn't see anything behind me, but I swear, for the next few miles, I felt like I was being watched. When I finally made it home, I tried to convince myself I was just tired, that my mind had played tricks on me in the dark. But the part that still haunts me. The next morning, when I went to check my car in daylight, I found smudged, dirty handprints on the driver's side window. And they weren't mine.